You chose the Panther.
We'll get started with our Panther now, Dee Dee's favorite jungle cat. So I'm starting off by taping off my paper so that my paper dries nice and flat and without wrinkles in it. And then I'm going to go on and start sketching out my panther. Now, because panthers are so dark, I did have to adjust the exposure on the picture I used on my computer for the panther. And I apologize, I couldn't figure out a great way to have my panther picture up on the screen at all times for you guys. So you're probably just going to have to pick out your own picture of a panther and adjust the exposure. Or you can pull up this video on a second device and pause it on one of the screenshots of the panther itself. But I'm just doing basic shapes here, basic placement of my panther, not much detail yet, but you want to outline the face, the body, and any objects that are in your background for shape reasons. I'm going to paint a bold color in the background now using acrylic paint. So I'm taking yellow and then mixing in a little brown and white to kind of give it a little bit more of an opaque finish on the white paper. Yellow sometimes can show up a little translucent. And then I chose this color to kind of contrast with the darker purple tones that I'm going to use for the panther and just for interest. So I drew on leaves in the background but left some room in the horizon for this fun accent color. And then I think I'm also going to add this to the eyes of my panther, but just kind of fill in around the outline of your background and the cat for your background color and choose whatever color you want. At this point, I'm just going to start using my watercolor now to paint in some basic leaf shapes. So I'm not overthinking this here, but I am going to start with a lighter shade of yellow and then slowly add in some greens and darker shades of greens and browns. You do want to do it from light to dark with your colors when you're working with watercolor, because it's basically impossible to paint a light color over a darker color. And then what I'm planning to do is have some larger leaves kind of surrounding the panther and in front of the panther, and then off to the far upper left of the paper I'm going to have some smaller leaves so that it looks like the panther's walking away from that area. But don't overthink this step, this is really just to get some basic leaf shapes in there and color built up. We'll add more detail later. For some of the larger leaves, you could probably decide to have one side of the leaf darker and one side of the leaf lighter, starting off now just to play around with the way the sun is hitting those leaves. You could probably even just leave your leaves done after this step if you wanted, if you want to go for that more abstract look. But I kind of like the way the leaves are looking right now and how the painting in general looks even before even filling in the cat. So you do have the option to be as abstract as you want or go for a little bit more detail like I'm going to try to do later. Alright, so we're going to be moving on to the highlights on the panther next, and what that means is basically the spots where the sun is hitting on the panther first. So when I look at my photo, it's on the face, it's on the one paw, it's on the back, on the leg, a little on the tail. So there's a lot of little spots of highlights, and I'm going to use a very light shade of purple mixed with a little white and gray for my panther. Now, you do kind of want to plan out where your highlights go, because this is going to be the lightest tone on your panther and you're not going to be able to add in more highlights later very easily. So it's going to be hard to paint over any darker tones with a light shade of watercolor. Back over the darker tones later, so do kind of plan that out as far as where the next step is going to be to paint your midtones. Now this is going to be anywhere on the Panther that's not especially bright or especially dark, so it should be the majority of the Panther. Now for this part, because you spent a little more time filling in your highlights, you can use a little more liberty with the midtones. If you do end up having to add more shadows on top of your midtones later, you can do that. The darker colors will be able to go over this medium tone just fine. So you don't have to spend as much time thinking about the midtones, but do kind of get a nice base layer of paint on, and kind of you'll start to see the shape and shadows come together for the Panther. And for this paint, I just used the same purple I was working with before, added in a little bit of brown to make it a little bit darker, but I still want it to have kind of a nice medium purple look. And finally, we're going to add in the shadows on the Panther. So, as you can see, the shadows are kind of under the body, under the face, on the chest, and most of the shadows are on the right side of the limbs versus the highlights being on the left side of the limbs. And that's exactly how the sun works. So go ahead and fill in your shadows. I am using a little black and brown paint now mixed in with the purple that I was using before. And as you can see, it's not going on as straight black yet. I did that intentionally so that later I can still add in some finishing details with black and it will still show up. But get the basic shape in there and the basic shadows. You can also at this point start to add some little details for the ears and the eyes and the nose. But we can touch up those areas later too. At this point, it's just kind of about tweaking your painting to get more detail in areas where you want it. So I'm going back with a very fine detailing brush while my cat dries off, and I'm going to focus on the leaves by adding more detail to the tips of the grass leaves just to shape them out more and let you know where they are and what the depth of the grass is. You can do as much of this work as you want or as little as you want. I might go back later too and add a little bit more depth and more color to the grass, but you could definitely be done with the grass after this step. While my grass dries, I'm just going to switch back over to the Panther now and add some kind of sun-kissed yellow highlights onto the Panther in those brightest spots on the cat. And I think it'll be a fun way to kind of tie in the background color a little bit more. And I like yellow, so why not? But this is a completely optional detail to add. I just think it'll make that yellow color pop more in the painting and be fun. So especially around the mouth and the forehead and eyes, I feel like this cat needs more detail. So with my black fine paintbrush, I'm going in, I'm adding details to underneath some of the limbs where the darkest shadows are, and then I'm gonna work on pulling out the nose, the mouth, the eyes, and the point on the forehead where it kind of curves into the top of the nose. I'm going to pull that out a little bit more too, with more definition of black in that spot. But this Panther is just about done. I'm going to go back in after this video, add more detail to the grass, but I won't make you watch all of that. I'll just let you see the final product. So as we conclude this Panther painting here, I want to encourage you to check out the other Jungle Cat paintings. I actually think the Panther was the hardest of the three to make look good in the end, so you might like the other ones better. But this Panther, I think, is ready to roam.